The rest of the night passed in a blur. By the time I left her apartment, my mind was racing, replaying every interaction we'd ever had, dissecting each moment for hidden meaning. Had she always looked at me that way? Was I misinterpreting her kindness for something more? Or worse, was I fooling myself into believing she could ever see me the way I saw her? Over the next few days, I wrestled with these questions constantly, oscillating between hope and despair. I thought about calling her, texting her, reaching out in some way, but what would I say? Hey, remember that friendship we've built? Well, turns out I'm falling for you, and I have no idea what to do about it. It sounded absurd even in my own head. So instead, I stayed silent, burying my feelings under layers of self-doubt and hesitation. But silence doesn't erase truth. No matter how hard I tried to ignore it, she kept pulling me closer, and showing me parts of myself I never knew existed. There's a moment in every great discovery when the unknown becomes familiar, when fear gives way to wonder. For me, that moment came quietly, almost imperceptibly, as Claire and I began navigating uncharted territory together. It wasn't just about exploring each other, it was about rediscovering ourselves through the lens of something entirely new. What started as tentative curiosity blossomed into something profound, something transformative. And while it's tempting to reduce this part of our story to mere physicality, the truth is, it was never just about touch. It was about trust, vulnerability, connection. It happened gradually, like the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. Neither of us rushed into anything, instead, we let the intimacy unfold naturally, guided by instinct and mutual respect. There were stolen glances across crowded rooms, lingering hugs that lasted just a second too long, hands brushing against each other in ways that felt deliberate yet accidental. Each small gesture carried weight, building anticipation until the tension between us became impossible to ignore. The first time we kissed, it felt like stepping off a cliff, not because it was reckless, but because it required faith. We were sitting on her couch late one night, the kind of quiet evening where words seem unnecessary. She reached for my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine, and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, soft, searching, vulnerable. I've been thinking about this for a while, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. My heart raced, but I didn't pull away. Instead, I leaned in, closing the distance between us. The kiss was slow and gentle, filled with hesitation and hope. It wasn't perfect. In fact, it was messy, but it was real. In that moment, everything shifted. The walls I'd built around myself crumbled completely, leaving me exposed in a way that terrified and exhilarated me all at once. What followed was a series of discoveries, not just about Claire, but about myself. She had a way of making me feel safe, even when I was scared. Safe enough to explore parts of myself I'd buried long ago. One night, after another round of whispered confessions and shared laughter, she took my face in her hands and said, "You don't have to hold back with me." Her words hit me like a tidal wave, washing away the doubts I'd carried for so long. For the first time, I allowed myself to let go, to be present, fully and completely. Together, we explored intimacy in ways that went beyond the physical. Every touch, every caress, was layered with emotion. Claire taught me how to listen to my body, to pay attention to sensations I'd ignored or dismissed. She noticed things about me that I hadn't even realized, how I tensed up when I was nervous, how I shivered at the slightest brush of her fingertips, how certain sounds made my breath catch in my throat. Through her, I learned to embrace pleasure not as something fleeting or shameful, but as a form of connection, a language spoken without words. One particularly vivid memory stands out. We were lying side by side in bed, bathed in the dim glow of moonlight streaming through the window. Claire traced patterns along my skin with her fingertips, her movements deliberate and unhurried. "Tell me what feels good," she murmured, her voice low and steady. At first, I hesitated, unsure of how to articulate what I was feeling. But she waited patiently, giving me space to find the words. As I opened up, describing sensations I'd never put into sentences before, I realized something extraordinary. This wasn't just about satisfying desire. It was about communication, understanding, and trust. With Claire, I felt seen, not just physically, but emotionally. She encouraged me to express myself freely, reminding me that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was strength. Through these moments, I discovered aspects of my identity I hadn't fully acknowledged. Growing up, I'd always assumed attraction worked within strict boundaries defined by societal norms and expectations. But being with Claire challenged those assumptions, forcing me to confront questions I'd avoided for years. Was I gay, bisexual, something else entirely? Labels suddenly felt inadequate, unable to capture the complexity of what I felt. Yet, for the first time, I stopped worrying about fitting into predefined categories. All that mattered was the authenticity of my feelings, the depth of my connection with her. This journey wasn't just about desire, it was about acceptance. Acceptance of myself, of my body, of the person I was becoming. Claire helped me see beauty in places I'd overlooked, strength in moments I'd deemed weak. She celebrated my quirks, embraced my flaws, and reminded me that love doesn't demand perfection. Love asks for honesty, for effort, for presence. And in return, it transforms you. Of course, none of this came easily. There were nights when doubt crept back in, whispering cruel reminders of all the reasons this relationship shouldn't work. Nights when I questioned whether I deserved someone as kind, patient, and loving as Claire. Nights when fear threatened to overshadow the joy we'd found together. But even in those moments, she stayed by my side, holding space for my insecurities while gently pushing me to confront them. "You're allowed to take up space," she told me once during a particularly raw conversation. "You're allowed to want things. You're allowed to be who you are." Her unwavering support gave me the courage to keep moving forward, to keep growing. Little by little, I began shedding old habits, old fears, old versions of myself that no longer served me. I started seeing my body not as something to criticize or control, but as a source of power and possibility. I learned to appreciate its curves, its scars, its imperfections, all the marks that told my story. Claire showed me how to love myself, not despite my flaws, but because of them. As amazing as it felt, we both knew this wasn't going to be easy. Love has a way of making you feel invincible, like nothing in the world can touch you when you're wrapped up in its warmth. But love also has a way of testing you, pushing you to confront fears and doubts you didn't even know you had. For Claire and me, the euphoria of our newfound connection didn't shield us from reality, it brought it crashing down on us with a force neither of us could have anticipated. The challenges we faced weren't just external, they came from within, too, forcing us to question everything we thought we knew about ourselves, each other, and the life we were building together. At first, the obstacles seemed manageable, small whispers of doubt that echoed in the back of my mind. Was I ready for this? Could I handle the weight of loving someone so deeply, especially when that love existed outside the boundaries society deemed acceptable? These questions haunted me during quiet moments, creeping in when I least expected them. One night, as Claire slept beside me, her breathing soft and rhythmic, I stared at the ceiling, replaying every fear I'd tried to suppress. What if people judged me? What if they rejected me, or worse, rejected her because of me? The thought of being a source of pain for someone I loved so fiercely was unbearable. But those internal battles paled in comparison to the external ones. Society has a funny way of deciding who deserves happiness and who doesn't. At work, rumors began circulating after a coworker spotted us holding hands at a cafe. It wasn't malicious at first, just idle gossip, but soon, the comments turned sharper, more pointed. "Isn't she married?" One person whispered loudly enough for me to hear. Another muttered something about keeping personal lives private. Each word felt like a dagger, slicing through the fragile sense of security I'd worked so hard to build. I wanted to defend us, to tell them how wrong they were to reduce our relationship to idle chatter. But instead, I stayed silent, letting their words fester inside me until I couldn't breathe. Claire noticed, of course. She always did. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, she sat me down and asked, "What's going on?" Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a mix of concern and frustration. When I finally broke down and told her everything, the whispers, the stares, the constant feeling of being watched, she didn't try to sugarcoat it. "This isn't going to be easy," she said simply. "People are afraid of what they don't understand. But we don't owe them explanations. We only owe ourselves honesty." Her words gave me strength, but they didn't erase the sting of judgment. Things got worse before they got better. My family found out, not through me, but through someone else who thought they were doing me a favor by setting me straight. The phone call from my mother still haunts me. Her voice trembled with a mix of anger and disappointment. "Is this some kind of phase?" she demanded, her tone laced with disbelief. "You've always been such a good daughter. Why are you throwing that away now?" I wanted to scream, to cry, to beg her to see me for who I really was. But instead, I listened, biting back tears as she listed all the reasons this relationship was wrong. By the time we hung up, I felt hollow, like a piece of myself had been ripped away. Claire held me that night, her arms around me like a shield against the storm raging outside. "We'll get through this," she promised, though I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. And then there were the moments when I doubted us, not because I stopped loving her, but because I feared the cost of that love. There were days when I considered walking away, convincing myself it would be easier for both of us if I left. Easier for her to avoid the judgment, the isolation, the endless questions. Easier for me to retreat into the safety of invisibility. But every time the thought crossed my mind, I remembered why I couldn't give up. Because no matter how hard things got, being without Claire felt infinitely harder. She wasn't just my partner, she was my anchor, my home. Letting go of her meant losing a part of myself I had only just begun to rediscover. Together, we learned to face these challenges head-on. We leaned on each other in ways that deepened our bond, finding strength in vulnerability. When my mother refused to speak to me for weeks, Claire encouraged me to write her a letter, not to defend myself, but to share my truth. "Tell her who you are," she urged. "Not who she thinks you should be." It took me days to draft that letter, pouring every ounce of courage I had into each word. I didn't expect forgiveness right away, and I didn't receive it, but the act of writing it gave me clarity. I realized that while I couldn't control how others saw me, I could choose how I saw myself. And I chose to see myself as worthy of love, no matter what anyone else believed. We also leaned on the people who supported us, friends who stood by our side, colleagues who offered quiet solidarity, strangers who shared their own stories of resilience. Their kindness reminded us that we weren't alone, that love like ours wasn't something to be ashamed of but celebrated. Slowly, the weight of judgment began to lift, replaced by a fierce determination to live authentically, unapologetically. Still, there were moments when fear threatened to consume me. What if this didn't last? What if the world eventually wore us down? These questions lingered in the background, shadows that refused to disappear completely. But Claire taught me something invaluable: fear doesn't have to define you. You can acknowledge it, sit with it, and still choose to move forward. "We can't predict the future," she once said, her hand resting gently on mine. "But we can decide how we respond to it. Together." Her unwavering optimism became my lifeline, pulling me back whenever I teetered on the edge of despair. She reminded me that love isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. About showing up, even when it's hard. About choosing each other, over and over again, despite the odds stacked against you. And so, we kept choosing each other, even when the road ahead seemed impossibly steep. Despite everything, she taught me something invaluable, something I'll carry with me forever. Life has a peculiar way of teaching us its most profound lessons when we least expect them. For me, this journey with Claire wasn't just about falling in love, it was about discovering who I truly am and what it means to live authentically. Looking back, I can see how much I've grown, not just as a partner but as a person. This experience reshaped my understanding of relationships, love, and even myself in ways I never thought possible. One of the biggest lessons I learned is that love isn't confined to neat boxes or predefined rules. Before Claire, I believed there was a right way to love, straightforward, predictable, safe. But she showed me that love is messy, unpredictable, and beautifully complex. It doesn't care about labels or expectations, it simply exists, raw and unfiltered. Through her, I came to understand that love isn't something you find, it's something you create, moment by moment, choice by choice. And sometimes, those choices require courage, especially when they challenge everything you've been taught to believe. Another lesson was the importance of embracing change, even when it feels terrifying. Change forces you to confront parts of yourself you'd rather ignore, the insecurities, the fears, the doubts. But it also opens doors to new possibilities, ones you might never have considered otherwise. Letting go of the version of myself I clung to for 38 years wasn't easy. It meant dismantling old beliefs, questioning societal norms, and stepping into unfamiliar territory. Yet, every step forward revealed a stronger, more authentic version of me waiting on the other side. Claire didn't just help me accept change, she helped me embrace it as an opportunity for growth. Perhaps the most transformative realization was the power of vulnerability. For so long, I equated vulnerability with weakness, believing that showing my true self would make me a target for judgment or rejection. But Claire taught me the opposite: vulnerability is strength. It takes immense courage to let someone see you at your most raw, to trust them with pieces of yourself you've kept hidden. And when you do, magic happens. You connect on a level that transcends words, building a bond rooted in honesty and mutual respect. That kind of connection doesn't just transform your relationship, it transforms you. Through all the challenges we faced, I discovered something else: resilience. There were days when giving up seemed like the easier option, when the weight of judgment and fear felt unbearable. But every time I chose to stay, every time I stood beside Claire despite the obstacles, I grew stronger. Resilience isn't about never breaking, it's about finding the courage to keep going, even when you're shattered. Love gave me that courage, reminding me that no storm lasts forever. This journey also reinforced the idea that self-discovery is ongoing. Before Claire, I thought I had a clear sense of who I was, a fixed identity shaped by years of habit and conditioning. But she showed me that identity isn't static, it evolves, expands, and deepens over time. Loving her allowed me to explore parts of myself I'd neglected or suppressed, helping me reclaim pieces of my humanity I didn't realize I'd lost. She reminded me that self-acceptance isn't a destination, it's a process, one that requires patience, compassion, and a willingness to embrace imperfection. If there's one thing I want others to take away from my story, it's this: don't be afraid to question the narratives you've been handed. Whether it's about love, identity, or happiness, these stories often come wrapped in limitations that don't serve you. Be open to rewriting them in ways that reflect your truth. Ask yourself, what do I want? Who do I want to be? Don't settle for less than you deserve, and don't let fear dictate your choices. Growth begins the moment you decide to stop hiding and start living fully, unapologetically. To anyone watching this video, I encourage you to reflect on your own life and relationships. Are there parts of yourself you've been too scared to explore? Are there dreams you've put on hold because they didn't fit into someone else's plan for you? Take a moment to sit with those questions, to listen to the whispers of your heart. Trust me, you'll be surprised by what you find. Because here's the truth: if you've ever felt lost or unsure about who you are, remember, you're not alone. Sometimes, all it takes is one person to show you the way. As I sit here reflecting on everything that's happened, the moments of joy, the challenges, the growth, I can't help but feel overwhelmed by how much this journey has changed me. It's funny, isn't it? Life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. One moment, you're convinced you know exactly who you are and where you're headed. The next, someone walks into your life and turns your world upside down in the best possible way. That's what Claire did for me. She didn't just show me love, she showed me myself. She helped me uncover parts of my identity I didn't even realize were buried, teaching me that self-discovery isn't something you achieve overnight. It's a process, one that requires courage, vulnerability, and an open heart.